Assalamu alaikum and welcome to the Mamluks podcast. My name is Sim. Along with me are my co-hosts Sheikh Amr and Maheen. Before we get our show started this evening, please help us out on patreon.com/the and make sure you click on like and subscribe and click on make sure you comment in the comment section below before you exit out of the video. All right, we have the one and only Jeremy McLellan, comedian extraordinaire, self-described cousin of the Muslim Brotherhood.
The Muslim Cousinhood.
Muslim Cousinhood, huh?
Yeah, that's right. It's an organization I started because of what Pam Geller said, so we can get into that. She had a thing where, like, she had a video. If you don't know who Pam Geller is, she's a really wonderful woman who writes very thoughtfully on the Muslim community. And she had a thing where she accused me of being paid for and sponsored by the Muslim Brotherhood comedy circuit. That's the phrase she used. And, I got kind of, a little insecure because I thought, like, do they have a comedy circuit? And they just aren't telling me, and, like, I'm not invited to it and everything. But like from that, like, came, like, me being part of, like, the Muslim Cousinhood, which is just full of people who get accused of being Muslim.
Is this real? Did Pam Geller really mention all this?
Oh yeah. It was there was a video that I posted where there was a friend of mine who was Niqabi who got, like, harassed at, like, a Trader Joe's. This was like 2 years ago, and she sent it to me, and I put it up, and it went, like, super viral, like, all over the world. And then, like, people started, like, trying to, like, debunk the video, and they were like, this isn't real. Like, this is, first they said that it was an actress we hired to, like, harass my friend, and it was like, who would agree to that? Like, who like, what actress would agree to, like, like, yeah, I'll do that and ruin my career and never be able to work again. But then, like, eventually it was just like, well, I had done shows for, like, Helping Hand, and by the process of, like, it goes to, like, Kevin Bacon, and then it goes to the Muslim Brotherhood as far as, like, 6 degrees of separation. And so that's where that came from. And then it just started, like, becoming a thing.
I would have gotten you even more trouble.
What's that?
By being a cousin of the Muslim Brotherhood.
Yeah.
They just got banned. I don't know if you heard, or they were declared as a terrorist organization.
Were they?
By certain sellouts that we have in our community who basically
the UAE had like a fatwa, right?
Huh?
I saw Jack Brown posted a thing about, like, the UAE had done, like, a fatwa against the Muslim Brotherhood. Yeah, I gotcha.
Yeah. And for those who don't know, the Muslim Brotherhood is very much a grassroots organization who tries to do what a lot of Catholics do, actually, when they're in certain places that are impoverished and need help. They do a lot of basic health services and a lot of, hospitals, charitable activities.
Right.
So
clinics, all that good stuff.
Yeah.
But go ahead.
So that's why I'm here. I'm just here to represent the Muslim Brotherhood and just talk about, like, how great they are and stuff. And so, anything I can do to help, let me know.
So what's going on with you nowadays, man?
Yeah, COVID is, like, really crushed comedy, and so like, I'm doing shows from my home, which is always it's difficult because you don't get the immediate feedback that you would, and it's been kind of weird, but I've got it down to where, like, all right, if everybody unmutes their mic, then I can do like a small show for, like, 50 people or something, and so that's been good. And then the rest is just waiting for things to go back to normal, whatever that means, and travel. Like, this is the longest I've been just, like, at home in forever. I'm used to, like, traveling, like, 3 cities a week, or and like, I enjoy that life, like, on the road, and, like, but I didn't know that, like, I would have to stay at home so much, like, and I love my family, but when I started a family, that was the deal, is that I would be able to travel each week. I didn't agree to, like, 7 days, with them. I'm just being
no.
But it is a huge, and so, I mean, like, it's been huge. It's been a big wrench and everything.
But down South Carolina, I was watching this Clemson football game, and they got, like, 20,000 people in the stadium.
Did you say Dallas, South Carolina?
No, Clemson.
Clemson. Okay. I was
Yeah.
like, what?
Clemson.
Okay. Yeah. Clemson. My wife went to Clemson, and yeah, they still got that stuff. So
Yeah.
like, I can do shows in town. Like, I can do shows in Charleston, and I've done like little things here and there, but like not at all the same as like traveling full time, going on tour. And I miss like strangers. Like I don't know if you guys have felt this, but like most of the people I've interacted with since the pandemic began has been people that I know. And like people that I know really well. Whereas like before, I was constantly having like interactions with acquaintances, the people that you see a few times a year. And now it's become just like, and that has been really hard because I love that kind of life of like just traveling and being on the road and like interacting with people that way. So
did you feel that when you had to start performing during this whole COVID era online, basically, did it feel like you were starting anew? Like when you first started stand-up comedy, it's like you got to get used to all this, you got to get acclimated to this whole.
Yeah, a little bit. And like I think the first few months were really exhilarating. There was this whole new kind of thing, and you're trying to figure out how to do it. And like I love that kind of challenge. And then eventually it just kind of like, oh, this actually is not as good.
Yeah,
like it's not just different, it's actually just not good. Like,
because you literally have to feed off the crowd, and you got to see everybody's reaction,
right?
All that kind of stuff.
Right. And I mean, just from a logistical standpoint, if you're doing stand-up, if you're doing a tour, you can do the same material every single time. And because you're doing it in a different city, and like sometimes like different crowds in different cities. And but with this, you have to write like brand new material, or because like if everybody can tune in, then you don't want to like burn material. And so then it's like it's very interesting. And so I worry about, well, and so like if you burn material, all right, so you got to write new material. But the way that writing new material works for comics is you write a bunch of stuff that's probably garbage, and then you go to open mics and then you perform it, and then you see if people like it. And then like through that process, gradually it gets upgraded to like actual shows where you have like a new bit that is going to work in these shows. But with this, you got to just do it like online. Like, I mean, it's you don't get that like filtering process. And so really it's not the collapse of like comedy clubs that's been the hardest, or at least at comedy shows has been the hardest for like the comedy industry. It's the collapse of open mics, where there's no longer any ramp for like new comics to come up. Or I mean, I guess like new comics are getting started now on Zoom, which is just terrifying to me to think like what's going to happen when all this goes back to normal, and they're just going to try and go on stage and do the material that works well on Twitter. And it's like not even close to the kind of like you can't just like say jokes that like went viral. And you can always tell when you go to like open mics and stuff, and there's like some internet comedian there who's like, well, this went viral, and they say, and it's not funny because it's like it's not the same.
Have you?
Andrew Schultz, right?
Yeah,
he's doing the thing. Is he on TikTok? Andrew Schultz, a lot of stuff.
No, he puts everything up on YouTube.
Okay,
yeah,
well, not everything, but I think he puts a lot on YouTube. And Jeremy, I know you attempted to start a podcast.
Yeah,
it kind of.
So I started one called Holy Wars like a couple of years ago, where I interviewed people about like pluralism and religion, and then I started one with my wife that was just like for fun, like early in the thing, that was like Zunmareed, and which is like Urdu for like henpecked, and so that was that was fun, but then like after a while it was like I didn't enjoy it as much, so.
He had a smile.
I started back up again.
Oh, you had Royer on.
Oh, what's that? Oh yeah, I had Royer. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh.
So I had him for like 2 hours. That was awesome. It was like my favorite guest that I had on there.
Yeah.
But yeah. It was all about like sort of like, you can call it like post-liberal pluralism, where like, how do we live together in a way that's not based on like the liberal model of sort of lowest common denominator.
Yeah, he's a close friend of ours.
Yeah.
But his episode like really shot us into a new atmosphere or whatever, because it had like CNN and everyone following us, because the first time when anyone who was formerly incarcerated for jihadist related activities was actually interviewed and actually had the time to speak about their entire story. And I think both episodes were like a total of 4 hours or something like that.
Yeah, I felt that too. Like when I was talking to him, like I looked up and it was like an hour and a half had gone by, and I'm like, okay, yeah, this is
Yeah.
because like he grew up, he was raised Catholic at first, you know, and then he converted, and like so we had that connection, and then he had like I've thought a lot about it, like extremism and certainty and the desire for certainty, and like for him it was all about chasing that certainty and chasing that initial clarity that he had like in Bosnia, and so like but chasing that certainty is something that can get you in trouble. So that's something that I thought a lot about, and that I really enjoyed talking to him about.
That's pretty deep.
Yeah.
Chasing certain. Yep.
How did you get into this special niche of like South Asian Muslims, Pakistanis?
Yeah, how did that
like
happen?
you have another audience too that we don't know about, or
Yeah, I just threw a dart at the map, and then I was like, you know, all right, I'm doing biryani jokes, and there's no, I did. So before I was a comedian, I worked with people with intellectual disabilities. That's what I did for like the age of 15 to the age of 30. And
what are you trying to say?
What's that?
That we have intellectual disabilities?
Some of you do. Because like like part of like throughout that time, I had clients who were Muslim, who were Pakistani Muslim, and it was my job as their caregiver to like help them be good Muslims. And it was this like weird relationship that I had, and like Muslims have this relationship with lots of people, because there's, you know, Muslim caregivers are a huge part of like the caregiving industry in the United States, or profession, not necessarily industry, but like, and I knew a lot of Muslim caregivers whose job it was to like take people to church and like, you know, remind them of like to say the rosary, you know, things like that. And it's a weird, it was an interesting relationship that I have with like several different folks. And so when I started doing comedy, I was drawing on that. I was talking about religion. I was talking about like that whole backstory, and, you know, telling stories about like traveling with my clients through airport security, and, you know, just different things that were like interesting, and, you know, cooking for my clients who were like trying to cook biryani for like one of my clients, and like stories like that. And like when I started putting that stuff online, it went viral. And then I got invited to like some Muslim events, and word spread pretty quickly in the Muslim community. And so then like I had this, and then I did like an actual tour of Pakistan like 2 years ago, and that like blew up, and like I, you know, became like a household figure there, and just started like going with it. And that like, yeah, so that was a really interesting, like to me, like looking back, each step felt normal, you know, like each step in it, but like it is weird. And like I realize that it's weird when I like zoom out, and a lot of times I'll interact with people who like do not know that story at all, and like do not see like where I've been and like how I got to where I am, and don't know the like the religious nature of it. And so then they kind of like it's just, here's a white guy doing stand up for for Muslims, and it's sort of I have to remind myself that that's not normal, like that it's weird.
I think it's a really cool twist, though. I think it's since it's not expected, but you do it really well. And I don't know if that's what led you to learn Urdu. I remember.
Trying to,
yeah. But I remember, and I was talking to him about this before we started. There was that, I don't know what the name of the program was, where you're having a conversation with a certain type of program or app or something like that.
Yeah, it was Pimsleur's Urdu. It's just like an audio thing, but yeah, it sounds like I'm being coached by a robot.
Yeah, and you had that on YouTube. I remember watching on Facebook too, on the video section, and I was like, dude, this guy is really like all in, you know. So that's
it's fun, and I enjoy doing it, and like so it's not just like
I bet the crowd that you Pakistan was pretty intense, right? Because they were probably
it was. I mean, they all knew who I was, and like, you know, were fans of mine, and they came. So it wasn't like I was just, you know, performing for people who didn't know who I was. So it was a very warm crowd who were there to see me, and so I had so much fun there. And I've been back like a few times, and this is actually the first year in like 4 years I haven't like gone like to Pakistan. It's been like kind of sad, but normally I'm like there for a month, and it's great.
What's the hardest part about adjusting to Pakistan? First time you go, what's the first thing that freaks you out? Or like, is it a squat toilet? Is it like traffic, pollution?
No, I mean, it's like it's just a lot of people, you know. Like, I mean, I'm from like it's just. I used to joke that like
it's okay. You can say it. You're the fear of getting mugged.
Yeah, no. It was
with a knife there. It's like a machine gun.
It's just like the sheer number of people, and not. I don't mean the mob. I mean, like, I used to joke that like Pakistanis have like a lot of extras. Like in like, if you think of Pakistan as like a film, like there's a lot of extras where you go over to people's houses and there'll just be like 5 extra people there, and they don't comment on like what's going on. It's just like, oh, that's my cousin. Yeah. They're just there. They're just hanging out, and like it's like they didn't get any speaking roles. They didn't get any SAG, like you know, and so that to me was really weird. And I remember the first time I went to Pakistan. When I came back, I had like culture shock coming back to America, because the first thing I did was I went to a white wedding. Like, I landed and literally went to a white wedding, and there was nobody there. It was like 5, you know, there's like 15 people, and everybody was drunk. And I was like, I don't like that. Like, it was shocking. It was a kind of it was culture shock for sure.
That's weird.
It's like the whole concept of like, I know he's talking about. I went to the village in Bangladesh, so I'm like East Pakistani, right? I'm saying like, you know, there's that civil war, like the war of whatever aggression you want to call it, war between the South Asian countries. Yeah. But
the war of Western aggression,
So we go,
which is most wars, to be honest.
We go to the village, and then they got this thing called the Mantri. Mantri is like something Bengali for like minister. I'm like, what does he do? He just watches our house. It's like, so because you know, you go there, and the whole tradition is you come from America, so you better be like laying some cash out for some folks. You distribute cash, right?
Lots of tips.
Tips. And so they're like, oh, you got to give some for the Mantri too. This guy too. I'm like, what do he do? I was like, oh, he watches our house. You know, there's like, it's extra dude there. You know, he's just hanging out. He's like, he's just there. He's just there. He's just taking up space. You know, breathing my oxygen. You know, it's like oxygen there is hard to come by, bro. Everyone's a chain smoker. There's pollution everywhere. And you got those I don't know if Pakistan has them, but Bangladesh, you got them CNGs, them things that just emit like carbon dioxide into the air, right? You know, and so I was like,
covered in soot.
You don't need that many people too. I'm like, man, some of y'all need to be dying because y'all are affecting the quality of the air.
Right.
Some of y'all just here taking up space, not doing nothing productive. Y'all just need to be dead.
This guy's getting Bill Burr, you know, bro.
You know what I'm saying?
He's getting Bill Burr.
Anyways.
Yeah, start talking about like depopulating the earth to make it easier to travel. Like,
right. Who speaking of like other comedians, who was your primarily like a big influence on your own comedy? And
I mean, I love Bill Burr. I love Brian Regan. Brian Regan is hilarious and very well respected, and like the joke is that he's every comedian's favorite comedian, and like people don't necessarily know who he is, but the main thing about him is that like he's clean, and it's interesting to watch somebody work who's clean and you know, who's still able to, and he's goofy though, like, so
there was always Bill Cosby too before, and now you can't say
Bill Cosby, Louis C.K. You know,
you can't tell anyone that
you have to start updating your like favorite comedian. I remember right after Louis C.K. got it was you know, people were asking me who my favorite comedian was, and it took me a minute. I'm like, you know, just lots of people, like, because you can't say, you know.
Just lots of people. So what got you into this? Like, because we know that, you know, and obviously, you know, you embody this, but comedians have to be very, very keen observers, right? And observing is one thing, but how to articulate it to make people feel comfortable about something that can be abhorrently wrong, but you make people laugh about it, right? So, you know, when did this kind of start for you? What age were you like?
I mean, I was always smart and clever, but I wasn't. And I think you need those things in order to be a good comedian. You need to be a good observer. The like cadence of comedy and the way of being funny on stage. That's something I had to learn as I went. But I was always a good writer and able to get at something that to flip. I mean, one way of describing like a lot of my material is like where someone has, this is like a common trope in my shows, is somebody has an experience with someone and then later realizes that what just happened is not at all what they thought happened. and sort of reinterpreting. And we've all been in that situation where you're sort of reinterpreting like an exchange that you have with somebody, and you're like, oh no, when I said this, that meant, oh no. And so doing that several times is a trope of mine where, and I like I like the sort of humility that hopefully instills in the audience, where you're sort of at the mercy of not necessarily the fates, but like you're like, we all have this like arrogance where we think that we can control reality, that we can control other people, and it's this like sinful desire to be God, I think, and that we can get a handle on everything. And I think that comedy at its best is a way of sort of breaking down those that arrogance, and you're sort of but in a way where you're teaching people that it's okay, that like that you don't know, you have your limits. Like language has limits. You have like, I think that every sort of form of comedy is a way of humbling like the listener, but also demonstrating that you can live in that humility in a way that's enjoyable. And actually the life is a lot more enjoyable when you live like that. Like when you're not this sort of arrogant person trying to sort of manage everybody on a string. So
did it start off with kind of just dabbling? Because Sim here, he did a stand-up comedy thing too. He tried to try it out. I think he liked it. He liked the experience. Well, is that what it was like for you? Like, I'm just going to try it. It seems kind of cool. I like talking in front of people. So I'm just going to...
I went to like open mics, and I was like, I can do better than these people, and like that, and then I did, and then those people became my friends. But it's
it's improv, like, was it kind of like improv, or you just
prepared? No, it was stand up. It was straight stand up. Improv is weird, like, and I'm too anxious of a person to like to just be in that. Well, I think I used to be, and I try to do it, but I haven't tried to do it in several years. So I think now I'd probably be better at it, like than I was. But there's a very big difference between thinking on your feet, which is something that I can do, being funny in the moment, being working out bits and sort of playing with ideas to create like either a story or some kind of thing. I can do that, but I can't like be like a Russian butcher. And like with improv, you have to like assume a character and be that guy, and then think on your feet as a Russian butcher or whoever you decide to be in the scene. And that's always been more difficult to me. Whereas I can just think off the top of my head, like no problem. So
you remember that show, Whose Line Is It?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's improv. So
that was
those
sick.
people. Yeah, those people can just assume a character, assume a situation, convey it to their partners, and I have like close friends who are amazing improv people, and they're brilliant. And like it's just, I get anxious doing it, and it's I think like my main thing is like, I'm trying to be funny, and you're not supposed to try to be funny.
Yeah.
Like when you do it, you're not supposed to get your head in there.
That's a challenge for us on this show. We try to incorporate humor, and I always talk to these guys about, putting on a show rather than just having any other podcast, and how to, differentiate ourselves from everyone else, because people can't emulate your wittiness and your humor and your mindset. People may be able to get the same kind of cameras and microphones and studio and everything else, but they can't get your brain, and that's what will be the ultimate deciding factor between your success and every other podcast out there. So like I'll put on old episodes of Whose Line Is It Anyway, and other things, just to get in that mindset of being funny on your feet, and and that method itself is you kind of have to train yourself. You have to kind of because there's like different hats that we have to play when we're doing this podcast. It's like one day we're going to be talking about psychology and therapy, and the other day we'll be talking about economics and how COVID will destroy the economy or whatever, Yeah. And so, like before the show, like I'll be driving and I'll just be like, kind of have to get my mind into the moment, or and reduce the anxiety levels as well, right?
Sure.
And allow your kind of mindset to reconfigure itself to be an entertainer. So talk about that a little bit, and let us know how your your method is before a show, or even the days and weeks leading up to a show?
That's a great question.
I mean, my whole thing is,
especially when it's like a new bit, when it's like
you have to reinterpret your anxiety as like excitement. I think that's like a big key that a lot of people have thought, is that, if your heart's beating really fast and you're like sweating, you can tell yourself like, I'm panicking and I'm going to screw it up, and then get inside your head so much. Or you can just you can tell yourself that what's really going on is you're like excited, and that this is, and also like, I remember I go to therapy, and I used to I remember a very early conversation that I had with a therapist was about how I really wish that things on social media didn't bother me at all. That I would get anxious about stuff on social media, or I would be and so then I would beat myself up for being anxious about it, because who cares? It's social media. We're all like men, and it doesn't really matter. And he's like, all right, so tell me about your social media career. And I'm telling him about all this stuff, and it's like, no, that sounds like kind of high stakes stuff, where I'm not Muslim and I'm talking about Islam and Christianity to hundreds of thousands of people. Why is it weird that I would get anxious about that? That's a normal thing to get anxious about, and if I make a mistake, then maybe I don't get to travel somewhere, if I really screw things up somehow, then maybe I can't provide for my family. These are high stakes things. And when I realized that,
or you got a contract on your head.
Yeah, sure. Right. Yeah, whatever. So these are not, these are normal things to be anxious about. And so it was through that, I realized something really big, which is that most of the, I won't say suffering, but most of the anxiety that we have and depression or whatever is us beating ourselves up for our reactions to things. That turns out to be 90% of the suffering, not the 10% that's actually just the original, reaction. Yeah. So, once I realized that, it's fine. I allow myself to feel things, and then I move on, and don't
There's something else to this, Jeremy. There's one thing I always wanted to know is, as a stand-up comedian, because I used to get a lot of inspiration. I used to be terrified of being on stage. I used to have major stage fright. And even when I started teaching, I used to watch a lot of stand-up comedy just to help me just deliver the lessons that I'm teaching, right? I'm a high school teacher. So, and that's for Islamic studies, right? So one of my keys to getting rid of or being creative with stuff that I teach was actually watching stand-up comedians, right? But one thing I always want to know about stand-up comedians is, what is it like? Because you were just talking about anxiety and all that kind of stuff. What is it like when you're on stage and you're completely bombing, and you have a whole bit to finish? You have a whole, a whole session to finish. You have a half an hour left, and it's going really bad. How do you finish? Do you just bail?
Especially you're dealing with a lot of immigrants and people who, I'm sure you get invited to certain events by the Pakistani Medical Association. I don't know if that's even an organization, but there's a lot of uncles over there who don't understand Western humor, and that's basically what killed my comedy career when I.
So it's actually
nobody understood my jokes.
I've never straight up bombed at a Muslim event, and I think that there's been some jokes that didn't do as well as I wanted them to, but as far as what you're describing, actual bombing, I've never had that happen. And because for the most part, this is pre-pandemic, I'd be able to work it out either on stage or with a Muslim friend on the phone, and I've gotten a pretty good sense for which material will actually work. But I've bombed plenty of times at open mics. But the thing about open mics is that you have friends who are comics there, and among comics, it's funny when someone bombs. It's sort of a badge of honor, and it's kind of So as far as getting paid a lot to go somewhere by myself and performing for a bunch of people and doing terribly, I don't think that's ever happened. I think because of that ramp. Now, if I got booked to do an event right now, and they were like, we want you to do all new material, but we want you to physically be there. Like, I don't know what would happen. Maybe it would bomb because I wouldn't be able to have that feedback. But like, I think for the most part, you don't barrel through. Like, one thing that's is that if you're doing a bit and people are not enjoying it, you don't just like barrel through it. Because I think the biggest thing is that when people are watching comedy, there's an illusion that you're coming up with it on the spot, right? Yes. And that they're there and you're there, and this is me talking to you. Now they know it's a performance, but like if something happens, like if you get heckled, or if somebody like gets like angry with you, or if like no one is laughing at all at like the parts that you know are funny, like you have to stop. Like you have to just move on to something, and you can switch the tone. You can go to something that you know is going to work, just to get the audience back. You can tell a story that gets them to like you, even though it's not like as hilarious of a story as like, you know, as some of your other stories. I mean, like there's different strategies you can do to like get an audience back. Yeah, I mean, it's.
I mean, you mentioned hecklers. Sorry to cut you off.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned hecklers, and like, does that kind of throw your whole game off, or does it just give you more material on the spot? I don't know.
It's never good. I mean, like, there's a chance that it'll be good because you might be like on fire and like, but like, and so you'll watch stuff on YouTube, like, you know, comedian destroys heckler, but you won't see the like 50 other times that it just screwed up the whole show. But for the most part, it depends on your comedy. Like my comedy is like I'm not mean to the audience.
Yeah,
like I'm not spiteful towards them. And I don't mind comics who are, but like that's just not me. And so when I get a heckler, I don't go in to like destroy them, you know, and because who knows, maybe that's like some like important person, and like or maybe they're just maybe they think they're helping the show. Maybe they watched all those videos and they're like, if I heckle, like it'll be good. Maybe they've got like a girl next to them that they're trying to impress, and then you're gonna like screw up, you know, I don't know. Like there's all this stuff. And so I always try to like see things from their perspective, but you have to stop the bit, because if you keep going while someone's yelling at you, everyone in the audience immediately snaps out of that illusion, and they know that you're just doing a like you're just reciting like a set, you know, because like if you're having a conversation in a group of people and somebody starts yelling at you, you're going to stop what you were saying. And so when you do that in a sort of if you don't stop in a comedy, you know, situation, I think it ruins the rest of the show. The illusion's gone. So you got to stop.
I wonder how often you would get a heckle. I attended your show at Benedictine University a few years back. I think some fundraiser. I could see a Muslim audience in general being kind of not going there, because for them it's like, first of all, they ain't trying to impress no chick, because you know they're gonna get whipped or something. Their dad finds out. You know what I'm saying? That's like
but there's always an uncle who like thinks he's hilarious and starts adding stuff. Yeah, starts adding stuff to your show. Or this is something that I get a lot in like at like Muslim specific shows. Just a 5-year-old kid wanders on stage, and the parents think it's hilarious because y'all have free range children, and y'all just let them roam. And now I gotta stop, and I can't be mean to the child. And this happens like so often, you know.
You just cuss at me and be like, you know, I'll be okay.
I can see my dad being one of those type. My dad will be the uncle.
And the parents are like in the second row, just being like, "Ha, isn't this cute?" And they're like filming it. Yeah, and I'm like, this is not cute. I was doing a bit, you know.
No, that's like
you ever do crowd work though? Like just pick on people? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But again, like my crowd work isn't like vicious, and because like I think like there's a lot of my material that depends on you liking me. And I realized this early on because like, you know, I worked with people with disabilities, and if a stand-up comedian starts doing a bit about someone with a like with Down syndrome, for example, like there's a part of the audience that's just like, what's going to happen? You know, there's like, they think you're going to be vicious. They think you're going to like make fun of the person. And like, I have stories about people with Down syndrome that are really funny and that like are charming. And like, you know, if you like me and if you're on board with me, it's great, you know. But so I had to start putting those stories like towards like at least in the second half of the show, because like I got to get you to like me first. If I don't like get you to like me first, then you're not going to be on board, and you're going to be like, thinking that I'm going to be vicious. So I could stop a heckler and try and destroy them and try and be like really mean to them. But then if I was like, all right, anyway, where was I? Okay, so I was working with a guy with Down syndrome. Like, there's no way that like people would be able to like emotionally go from like me being a vicious person to like then me working with somebody with Down syndrome, unless I was like going to be mean to them. So like, I think, and that's just something that I noticed along the way, where I was like, you know what, like, I love like mean comedy, and I love like all different kinds. But there's a part of me that's like, I can't be like that vicious and have people like, because like, I mean, like if I do a show for like a Muslim audience, like there's going to be people there who don't know me, who have no idea what I'm going to do and have never heard like a non-Muslim joke about Islam or, about Muslims before in a way that they would like. And so there's a hesitance there. And so like, I have to get them to like me first, and then maybe some of their like, maybe their shoulders drop a little bit, and then I can go into like some stuff.
You ever do like vicious comedy among your friends though? Like just
for sure, yeah.
Cheering to each other. Like there's no.
Yeah, I mean roasts. I love. Yeah. I love roasts. And I think they're such an important part of like the comedy, and I think they're very therapeutic. Because in a roast, you have all the people that and they're going after you for things that like you may not have even known people knew about you, or like it's like it's the stuff like it's the stuff that like you're really sensitive. It's like there's nothing, and it's like the things that but at the end of the show, like people like they love you and you're still friends. And I think that process, I've talked to a lot of comics about this, we've all experienced the same thing, where like that process teaches you, I think, that those things don't make you unlovable. Like they don't mean that you can't be friends with people. And so I think there's a real deep value in like, you're worried about your weight, and then like 20 people make fun of your weight, but then like they're all like, loving you afterwards, and you make fun of them and stuff. Like I think there's something really beautiful about that.
I wondered about that. Like people who sit in like the front row and they know that the comedian's going to be vicious.
Oh, sure.
Go in on them, right? Because I mean that's a forte of some comedians, right? And they're just known to be vicious. So why would somebody sign up to be in those front rows? I always wondered that, because
usually it's like their appearance, right? It's their appearance or the way they come across. And so if you're not sensitive at all about your appearance, then you wouldn't, go ahead, sit in the front row and have people, make fun of you. But if there's something that you're sensitive about, like, some episode in your life, like a suicide attempt or something, and that, but then at a roast, that the other comics are going to bring that up. Like,
I remember like those Comedy Central roasts. Yeah. That Jenner, Caitlyn Jenner was on there.
And Bruce?
Yeah.
No.
So,
okay.
This apparently one of the conditions that was made was that you can't talk about that hit and run. So
it wasn't the trans stuff; it was the hit and run. That's funny.
Yeah. So apparently that was off limits. But usually on those roasts, everything's on the table. Like you're able.
Yeah, there might be some stuff that like for various reasons that you tell people. And I've been in like group chats before roasts where somebody's like, "Don't mention this," and it's because like their parents are going to be there and they don't want like something they did to like be out. But like for the most part, it's like you're making fun of like people who have sickle cell, and you're like going out, and so like, but like that's very different than going after somebody. And that's like my whole theory of Trump was that Trump came up during all those roasts, and there's like the roast of Donald Trump, and Trump's like, I think Trump's philosophy of like, the question is like, is he racist? Is he anti-Muslim? Is he sexist or whatever? And it's like, I feel like he has like a very roast kind of You know, it's like there's a bit by Chris Rock where he talks about how he's got nothing against people with one leg, right? He would never insult people with one leg, right? But if he got into a car accident and the guy got out and he had one leg, he's like, I'm talking about that leg, right? Like I'm like, and that I think is Trump. Like Trump, for the most part, like he'll use racism, sexism, Islamophobia, whatever, to
be liked,
to insult people who he feels has slighted him or who he feels doesn't like him, you know. But like that's different than, so like, you know, John McCain was going after him and he's like, I like people who are not captured, you know. And but then like that, which is funny, like that's a funny thing to say to somebody. He's roasting somebody for like getting, you know, being a POW. But then there was that story that came out where like he was insulting POWs in general, like where he was like, you know, and I didn't buy that story. I didn't think it was true because like Trump, everything is personal for Trump. And I feel like, you know, for him, it's all about whether somebody has personally insulted him. And so that, like, that's my theory of Trump. But in terms of like roasts and stuff, like, yeah, anything goes. And I think it has to be that way in order to achieve its effect, which is like, you know, at the end, it's like you've just been through like, you know, you've been brought through the ringer, you know.
A lot of Asian or Desi type weddings are incredibly boring. A lot of people don't have like any activities. I know at least in Arab culture, there's like dances and stuff, but in a lot of Desi weddings, that's even not okay. But so what we've noticed is in the Chicago area, I don't know how much it is around the country, but a lot of people have started incorporating roasts into.
Oh, that's great.
Just go into it, and it's so new to some of the aunties and uncles in our area that they're like, wait, this is a form of comedy, and then they finally get it, and then it's kind of cool thing to see because that whole expression of art wasn't even something that they
that's great.
Okay, because there would be some really vicious things. I know, like in one of your cousins' weddings, Sheikh Hammer, what was mentioned something about
Hamza Makbul.
Oh,
he'd make a great roaster.
No, yeah.
So
he'd make a great roaster.
What was that? What do you?
No, it was basically talking about.
Bunch,
so yeah, I remember. So the roast was, he was saying that, so in Islam we have this whole thing before you have sexual intercourse with your spouse, you need to be doing this like this dua, right? So make sure the devil don't come and infiltrate your offspring.
Yeah,
you know what I'm saying? So Sheikh Hamza was he's giving this advice to this. I don't know, you probably seen him on Twitter, Hamza Makbul on Twiter. Yeah. So he was giving advice to the crowd, to the newlyweds, to make sure they said that dua to the dude before he hits her that night. So basically, and then he looked around, he's like, and some of y'all, by y'all's appearance, looks like y'all's parents didn't make that dua. It seems like
that's funny.
Yeah. So all the young guys are laughing. All the elders were like,
right.
That roast one, I wasn't even there, but that's tawatur.
Yeah, that's
yeah, for sure.
A whole bunch of people that talked about
that. But also, like, humor is something that's like, that's the last thing that you get. I mean, I don't know if the elders in question were immigrants, but like humor is like the last thing that you get when you learn a language, you know. Like sarcasm and like wordplay is such a difficult kind of thing that you're used to kind of treating things literally, and so yeah, so that's difficult. That's a
you've been murdering it on like Facebook and Twitter. Just I know at least during the lockdown, you've just been really. I can tell you're practicing just by your engagement.
Practicing comedy or practicing
your tweets are funny as heck, and I
people
just
trolling him. Like, was that incident a couple of weeks ago? So a lot of people are mad that like you got clout in the Muslim community, but then they can't get clout. People are jealous.
Man. Right?
You know that, right? So
that's the thing that's been going on for years, and it's such a, like, when it happens now, there's a part of me that's just like, all right, you know. And it's hard to know where it comes from, because each time it comes from a different kind of thing, you know. And like at first it bothered me, and I spent a lot of time trying to like justify myself to people, you know. But the thing about like, you know, the thing about that is that like they never had criticisms of like things that I would say, or criticisms of like you know, like it's not like they came to a show and then they came up like afterwards mad at me. Like that's literally never happened. Instead, it's like, it's just, you know, I am like a white Christian and I have pull or like whatever influence in the Muslim community, or, you know, just like I perform for Muslims. They come to my shows, or they, you know, I get booked at events, and that's the criticism, is just that dynamic, right? And that's always been kind of hard for me to, because at first I would try and justify myself and be like, no, but like it's sort of like telling someone you're not an undercover cop. It's like, well, an undercover cop would say that, so like there's nothing you can say to actually like win somebody over. And I've talked to people, you know, like Omar Suleiman, or you know, like who have told me like, just keep doing what you're doing, and like people who doubted you at the beginning, you know, might come on board. And that's happened quite a bit. So
Right.
Where they either don't know my backstory, or they think that I just like, you know, found out that like people can go to Pakistan and get famous or something like that. I don't know. But
Did you
like,
realize how much South Asian people love white folks?
it's interesting. So like, I mean, I think that like, yeah, so there's two ways of describing that. And I've thought a lot about it. So like there's the colonial mentality, right? So that's the criticism, where like bloggers who are white will go to Pakistan and they'll like, you know, travel around, they'll get like tons, you know, hundreds of thousands of followers or whatever. And then and like that dynamic is something that like that a lot of Pakistanis are critical of, and they see that as, and they also see that being instrumentalized for like propaganda purposes by the Pakistani government, where the Pakistani government will like sponsor white people to come, and then, you know, and that's like one angle of the criticism. At the same time, like there's a part of me that like wants to push back on that a little bit, where like the whole fish out of water trope in comedy is so universal, where like here is someone who's not part of our community coming in and learning and having observations and going through like awkward moments and all this stuff. Like that is such a universal part of comedy that like, why wouldn't it also be true of people coming into, you know, like, like coming to India or Pakistan or Bangladesh or whatever. Like, so, you know, like who are the big people in late night comedy? Like there's John Oliver, who's English. There's Trevor Noah, South Africa. Like, so like the whole idea of like a foreigner coming in and being observant and criticizing and making jokes about your culture is so universal that there's a part of me that's like, is this phenomenon exhausted by like the criticism of the colonial mentality, or is it are there multiple things going on?
Yeah, dude, it's really funny when it comes to like, there can be a Desi guy that's going to be, you know, doing stand-up comedy to Desi people. It's not going to be funny at all. But when it comes from a white dude, man, or from a black dude, it's going to be so funny because they're not in the culture. So when you see it from somebody from the outside, it's a completely different dynamic.
Well, Russell Peters,
and it's also not the same material, you know. Like, well, you know, if I do material about Ramadan, I'm not like, you know, hey guys, you know how like in Ramadan we blah 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 blah. It's about like, you know, making sure that my client with autism like doesn't eat food during Ramadan. And like we're out in public and I'm saying he can't have food, and people overhear me and think that I'm like abusing this Muslim kid, you know, like, so like, I mean, that's a very short description of a longer story, but like, so it's not the same material is one thing, but like there's also like the opposite dynamic, where if you are like, I mean, there's a reason why like people love British accents, right? And why like people in the South think that like if you have a British accent, you're like super intelligent, you know, and you might not be, you know, but if you have a British accent, that's you know, and maybe that's like the American colonial mentality, where like rednecks, you know, we used to be a U.S. colony, so maybe that's what's going on. But I don't know. It's but I think there's, to me, it's interesting because there's and one thing that I've had to learn is that there is the sort of macro level analysis of this phenomenon that is interesting and that people can talk about. And where I think people make a mistake is is taking that macro level analysis and then immediately translating it into like, you know, either hate directed at me as a person, or criticism of me. And like, you know, like you can establish that, like, for example, like white people do better than other people whenever they do this, like, you know, they get better treatment or whatever. But it's hard to then translate that to like an individual person and be like, you only get treated this way because of blank. Right. And it's like, but also I worked with people with disabilities for like, 15 years. And like, I've got like, I'm also smart and like, I'm a quick read of people. And so I think after a while, it got to the point where I was just like, you know what, whenever somebody brings this up, I've heard everything that they've said. And I've listened to it, and I've been able to separate kind of like what about it is do I think makes sense according to my own tradition and my own understanding of like morality and everything, and then what is like just a totally foreign understanding of
the most simple reason is that when I see someone who is white and American and Catholic, such as yourself, knowing intimate details about our faith, that we thought, oh well, someone actually took the time to learn that and made a joke out of it. It adds on, even though it's like, it's not like in your face, but it's working on different layers of your of you, and it's adding onto the humor as well. So
yeah.
Let me ask you, how annoying, have you gotten to a point where as we're talking, it reminds me of a time where you probably know Dr. Craig Considine, who's another who is in these Muslim circles. And I remember we were at this conference a year ago, and it's like everybody always asks him, like, Dr. Craig, have you ever thought about becoming a Muslim and this and that? Yeah. But I'm sure that has to happen more often than not. Sure. Like, have you gotten to a point where you're just like, guys, just stop? It's annoying, or is it like
because no, I don't agree with that, and I don't I guess what is annoying is when somebody's like, hey man, you should read the Quran. And I'm like, oh, okay, I have. Like, I mean, there's the people who are doing like Dawah 101 stuff on me, and I'm like, okay, just you think you're the first person to talk to me about this stuff? Like, okay, like you need to bring like advanced Dawah, studies like to this conversation. Like, but no, I think that there's it's not like I just like a different kind of food or something, like this is something, and also both like Catholicism and Islam believes that our faiths are rational. Like, it's not this sort of fideistic understanding of religion where it's just sort of just added on to reason. And so like I would expect Muslims to talk to me and to want to like, if they love me, which I think a lot of like people who are Muslim do, then they would want me to know the truth, and they would want me to believe what they believe, and not as like I don't even think it's I don't even think there's any bad motivation in it at all. I think that there's a there's a sort of like this is something that I find beautiful, and that has structured my life in such a way that I would be not myself without it. And I would love for you to have this as well. And I think that, like, I mean, why is that? I mean, that to me, that's beautiful. And to me, that's love. And I think that
I'm saying that like something can come from a good place, right? But it can still be annoying.
I mean, it's funny. No, to me, like things don't actually get annoying for me. I think it's like for the most thing. Anytime something gets annoying for me, I just write a bit about it, and then I'm like thankful for it happening. Like people give my wife, like when my wife travels with me and stuff, they give her a lot of scarves, scarves as gifts, scarves. And, they're like, just here's a scarf, and it's just really beautiful, and you could wear it on your neck or like maybe your head later. And I think like it's such like, or people give me art that's like in Arabic, and it's like, and I'm like, what does it say? And they're like, don't worry about it. And I'm like, what do you mean? And they're like, can you take a selfie with this woman in Houston gave me this like Arabic thing, and she wanted me to take a selfie with it and post it online. And I was like, what does it say? She's like, don't worry about it. It's just Arabic, it's really, and she wanted me to take a selfie and post it. And I had to take a picture of it and send it to a friend of mine. He was like, that's the Shahada. Don't like, you know, post a picture of that. Cause like, you know, but I also like when she did that, I wasn't offended. I was like, all right, I'm going to write a bit about this. Right. Where like, what did this woman think was going to happen? Where she thought I was going to post this online and then get like, you know, it would go viral. Right. And then I would be like, well, I guess I'm Muslim now. Right. Like I can't, it got 1.8 billion likes. You know, I can't just delete it. Right. And
the reason I ask is this, because I've got some friends who are Pentecostals. And they're kind of wild, you know what I'm saying? Oh, yeah. As far as you know, being out there, being upfront. So they will say that, listen, Islam is a demonic religion. You're, you know, fake prophet, this and that. I'm like, I respect your idea to have it, but after hearing it I'm only going to hear that X amount of times before I'm going to annoy it. Well, listen, you're going to keep shouting that stuff to me. Like, I get it. I don't expect you to believe.
Well, right. If somebody accuses you of like, if somebody says that like, you know, Jibril, whatever it was, a demon, right? If somebody says that and the revelation was a demon talking to them, like that means that like, and it's interesting. I mean, first of all, that's not you getting annoyed at something. That's like somebody like saying that you're worshiping the devil, right?
That's being Pamela Gillard.
Yeah, Pamela Gillard. So like that's very different. But what's interesting to me is that like for the most part, I think, and maybe it's just because Islam like sort of grew up after like Christianity, is that like there's a like there seems to be a pretty unified theory among Muslims about like if Christianity isn't true, or at least isn't completely true, then what happened, right? What happened like between the time of like Jesus and the apostles and disciples and the, you know, writing of the Bible and the growth of the Catholic Church? What happened in that process that like, you know, how did things get lost, right? Like what happened? For the most part, Muslims have a pretty standard story about like how Christianity lost its way or how the truth got, you know, but Christians have dozens of theories about what happened with Islam, right? There is no standard story. So you have people on one end who are like, you know, Muhammad, like there was a demon or something and or Satan, and then it was, but then you have other people who are like, well, he took a like some like Christian text, and then like, and so it's way, and there's like on the totally end of the spectrum are people who are like, you know, he was a mystic who then misinterpreted something, or you get to like the universalists who are like everybody receives you know, everyone has received revelation and different people at different times, and it's just a matter of interpretation. And so, but it's interesting because there is no one theory among Christians about like how to explain the rise of Islam. And so you get people like Pam Geller or like, you know, Spencer, who are like just super aggressive, and, you know, their whole thing is that it was, you know, either satanic or sort of like a Joseph Smith kind of thing where like Joseph Smith was a con man and then made it all up. But then on the other hand, you get people who are just like, you know, this is all just, you know, digging wells to the same water kind of thing. So it like, you never know what you're going to get. So with your Pentecostal friends, like it's a pretty aggressive, like understanding of Islam. Yeah. And I wouldn't imagine you would have much patience for that.
Yeah, I mean, so you mentioned like the different varying views of Christianity towards like the Prophet Muhammad and Islam. Like sure. Constantine, I have another podcast that I interviewed him on like a year ago, and he was like, and I was like, I gotta assume you believe the Prophet Muhammad is just a good dude, you know, but not a prophet. He's like, no, I believe he's a prophet, but I define prophet differently. Like,
yeah, his understanding of prophet, I haven't had any kind of interaction with him personally, but from what I understand, him and a bunch of other people, they stretch the word prophet to such a degree that neither tradition would understand that that's what prophet means. Yeah. And when people start doing stuff like that, I'm like, why do you like, I mean, at some level, I'm like, what's the impetus behind that? Is it the idea that like, you know, we can create this sort of third religion that encompasses like that gets like my one thing that I always said was that like whenever somebody claims to have understood or try to get at like the truth behind religions, all the religions get at this same truth. Whenever someone starts talking like that, they are inventing another religion. Like, because every religion believes that they are the religion behind like other religions, right? That like in some way these even like paganism, like, in some way they are grasping towards the truth, of which we are the full version. Like, I think everybody thinks that about their own religion. Whenever somebody's like, well, maybe we should say that like Jesus was the Son of God, but in what does son mean? Like, and then they start like, come on, man, like
it's that, it's all comes from like perennialism and the whole notion that all these streams lead to one river and then the ocean, which is heaven, and we're all headed in the same path.
And there's like a sense in which you I mean, not the full perennialist version of that, but there's a sense in which like, I would agree with that, like to the extent that like, at what point, like how wrong does someone have to be about God before they are no longer worshiping God? I think that's an interesting question. And at what point did somebody like let's say somebody like loves me, right? But they have like basic facts about like they call me Jerry, or like they
Jerry?
right. Jerry or like Germany, or
what you do. What you do.
You know what
you do.
Sheikh, so when I first came to this country, I used to
Sheikh Jeremy. He just did what you were talking about. He just called you Sheikh.
Yeah.
First time I came to this country, I was 5 years old, from the deserts of Medina. Have you heard about the deserts of Medina? That's where our noble prophet is from. That's where I came from. And what happened was the first
he doesn't know whether to laugh or just be serious.
The first white kid I met when I came was this kid named Jeremy, and I would call him Jeremy, like a germ. And he would get so upset, like it's Jeremy, and he had this black dog who was really racist, and he would always be barking at brown people. And he said, "Oh no, he's just scared because you're brown. He never seen a brown person."
And you keep saying my name wrong. That's why he hates you.
I'm sorry, before I rudely interrupted you. Go ahead.
No, but I think there's something also that I was really interested in is people around you. This is are you done talking about that thing? No, I was going to talk about something completely different.
So I actually wanted but one thing I'm curious about is I've met a lot of Christians who always say, I used to be Catholic, I grew up Catholic, and now they're non-denominational.
That's the worst.
Yeah, right. And it's but then for me personally, I'll say this much. When I took a class at a church a couple years ago, and then I've got these Pentecostal crazy friends and whatnot. And
you went to Benedictine, right?
Sorry? Yeah,
and you went to Benedictine?
I didn't go to Benedictine. I just went for your show.
Okay, nice.
You know what I'm saying? But
we get you.
I would say that to me, if you're going to be a Trinitarian Christian, Catholicism is the only version of Christianity that makes sense.
I remember you were saying that to me the other day.
Because like it seems like the Protestants cherry pick the church tradition to a certain point, and then they want to like throw you guys away.
Yeah, it sort of reminds me of I think the Protestant. I grew up Protestant, and it's very much it's sort of like, I mean, did you know, like, I mean, I've only met them online, but like Quranists.
Yeah,
who are like,
I've got like that stuff.
Yeah, who are just like, it's only the Quran. It's like, okay, like to me that's like Protestantism, where it's like, just this book and a rejection of the tradition. And it's like, okay, well then how do you know how to pray, right? Like what's the, like, there's and so then they like sort of try and reconstruct the tradition from like it's always a mess. And so, Protestantism, I think, is sort of a mess. It's also, I think, a very rational kind of understanding of faith, where like your faith is a series of propositions that you believe about reality, and you can sort of have it in your head. And that's like how I grew up was very intellectual. It was very sort of this is the system of thought that we have, and but it wasn't a bodily kind of understanding of the faith. And so I don't know if that answers your question or
I mean, but like, was that something? Because to me, what I've always, my experience with a lot of Protestants is like, well, we don't believe this. Catholics believe in something called purgatory, and we don't believe that.
Sure.
But there's no, like, when you start drilling down, like, why do you believe it? then it's like, oh, well, because, or they'll say stuff like, well, Lent is in the Bible. Why do Catholics do Lent? I was like, well, the Trinity isn't in the Bible either. And so as a Catholic, I could see you could justify it. Like, well, it's in church tradition. The Trinity is from the, from the ecumenical councils.
Well,
right?
I mean, like, so for Lent, I mean, Lent is based on like, Jewish tradition of fasting and and also Jesus going into the wilderness for 40 days. Like that's what Lent is based on, and that's in the Bible. But I think that kind of like bare minimum sort of Christianity, where Christianity is only a series, like a set of propositions about reality, something has to fill in those gaps. And like every for example, like, Catholicism has a long heritage about pilgrimages, right? And so pilgrimage is something that's very meaningful and has always existed in the Catholic faith. Protestants don't have that. But the desire to go on pilgrimage is something I think that's like sort of innate. Mm-hmm. And so instead people go to like Disney World or like, so you end up, you don't actually get rid of it. It just sort of migrates. And I've, instead of, this is like a criticism that I have of Christianity and, Protestant Christianity especially, but even like a lot of Catholics as well, is that over time, especially since the Reformation, we have gradually outsourced most of our parts of our tradition to either the market or the nation state. And what's left is this like spiritualized sort of personal understanding of your faith. And meanwhile, you'll go and you'll kill whoever the government tells you to go kill, because that's not religion. And so you end up with this like separation of like religion from everything else. And you end up with this construct called religion, which is just about your own personal beliefs. And then any tradition that doesn't abide by that, that dichotomy, i.e. you people, then gets called an ideology. Right. Mm-hmm. And I think that's the dynamic that is just stripped Christianity of most of its tradition. And the reasons behind it are pretty obvious. It's so that we it's so that we become manageable, right? Mm-hmm. So that we are then at the service of the liberal whatever worldview.
Sure. Like by the way, if you want to go to pilgrimage, where would you go?
I mean, I went to Rome.
Okay.
So going to Rome, but going to any like major basilica is like a minor pilgrimage. Back in the day, they went to Canterbury, but that's the Anglicans. They go to Canterbury. That's like the Canterbury Tales. Everybody going on pilgrimage to that. But I think that is a sort of a universal desire, and it's one that most traditions share, but Protestants is just like, well, whatever.
So I just wanted to ask a complete. It's always, I'm always curious about stand-up comedians. Is when they go places, like when you go places. After you become popular, and it's like, you travel a lot and you gather material from subtle areas and people. And are people sometimes careful about what they say around you, or like, are people
not really? I mean, they don't seem to have learned that lesson as much as they should have. But no, not really. I mean,
like people like around you, like my friend. You really have a friend named Maheen. And you'll say, "Hey, I was talking to Mahi," or do you ever name drop, or you just kind of?
No, for the most part. No, I mixed up the names. I always change the names when I do shows and stuff. And usually they can't really tell. So, but
nice.
Yeah. I need to use. Sorry, I hate to do this. This is going on for like an hour, and so I'd love to continue this. I have to use a restroom real quick.
Yeah, go ahead.
You can't go.
All right,
bro. You can't do that. Can you take the camera?
Huh?
I guess we'll just do a quick round table while he's gone.
Yeah, this feels like when.
He just did this. He just did this so we can see the cross.
Yes,
he's trying to convert
indoctrination.
It's like, is that what a cross looks like? First time I've seen one.
Let's see what the chat's like.
Yeah, I mean, I had to shut my phone down.
This feels like the Joe Rogan experience. This is when usually one of them have to go.
Let's see the people here.
We used to watch them or something.
The Joe Rogan experience. We're better than that. Anyways,
how many people are upset that we have a kafir on the show? Scroll up. The Trinity's polities, and no kidding. We know this.
All right.
Yeah, that's cringy. What's cringy?
Give dawah to him, Sim.
Give him Dawah, advanced Dawah.
Oh, Islamic News. I love these guys. You know who Islamic News is, right, Maya?
Yeah.
Islamic News is like the Onion for Muslims.
Oh, really? Okay.
They're
You have
humor,
a great dental plan, Jeremy.
Bro,
Okay.
those are my guys. I love those guys.
Great dental plan.
I have met brothers who really.
Wait. What was the reason? Why did he say they have a great dental plan? Are they trying to say his teeth are crooked, dude?
Oh, some of these guys want more to go live
more
now.
To go live now. Sim will be pissed. Hey, by the way, make sure more. You got any gear? Like I got the Muzzy Buzz gear here. You know what I'm saying? Like, but don't wear to a Hanafi joint because the sheikh might like blast you for. Where that happened to me a couple weeks ago. I worked this joint and the sheikh, this Ottoman sheikh, pulled me aside and was like,
"Ooh, my man Tariq Ali's here.
You know,
Tariq Ali.
I'm like, he's taking a shahada yet?
Yeah, Tariq Ali, you know him, right?
Yeah, from Boston.
From the east
Boston,
side, yeah, East Coast.
Boston.
Sheikh Tariq.
Yes, and where can we find your stand-up comedy? Was it recorded at all?
No, I deleted it because I was so embarrassed by it.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I was so embarrassed by it.
Did you have somebody record it?
I had my son record it.
Get out.
Yeah.
Mufti Mu'min Abu Hamza, mashallah. Sheikh, when you come on our show? I've been asking you, and you've been like blowing me off.
Yeah.
You've been saying like you got people above. I'm too lowly to come on the podcast. Astaghfirullah. We have degenerates on all the time. We can certainly accommodate you. So
we were just
stop talking about me.
We were just reading the comments. We're not back.
While you were gone, we were saying that you were trying to indoctrinate us with the cross right behind you.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, right.
It was a setup.
Yeah, that's right. I didn't even have to go to the bathroom. I just went and prayed for you guys. Said a quick rosary and then.
Funny guy.
No, but how would I be a Catholic in South Carolina, man? I figured it'd be harder to be a Catholic than a Muslim in South Carolina.
Well, yeah, it's interesting. So growing up, I grew up in Charleston, and I still live here, right? So, growing up Presbyterian here, like we didn't know too many Catholics, and but there's like a big Catholic school here, and they were always good at basketball. We always lost to them. So, after now because of like the deindustrialization of like Ohio and New Jersey and stuff, there's been a huge migration from traditionally Catholic places to to Charleston to work in like Boeing and all these like big manufacturing. And so South Carolina being like a right to work state, we poached a bunch of manufacturing from places like Washington. And with that came a bunch of people who are Catholic. And so my parish has like tripled in size in the last like few years. I live in a neighborhood that's like new construction, and like most of the people here are Catholic, but they weren't born here. And it's been really interesting to see just like the demographic change in Charleston become more Catholic than it used to be. But I grew up Southern Presbyterian, and they certainly weren't terribly friendly to Catholics. And but thankfully, things changed enough to where when I think the key to being accepted as somebody converting to Catholicism is to spend so much time around Muslims that when you tell your parents that you're converting, they're just like so thankful. Right. I remember I told my parents that I was becoming Catholic, and they were just like, "Oh, okay." Like that's, I think that's the key. That's what you got to do. And then that like sort of softens the blow.
Yeah, but hang out with the muzzies,
Yeah, no, it's like, but like I've always like I was telling you before the show, my wife's from the South, so we did a road trip like 11 years ago. And Charleston's like one of my favorite cities.
It's beautiful.
Just the architecture and the antebellum homes. Oh, they would we couldn't find any halal restaurants at the time.
Oh yeah. And there's so my friends like Raheel and Miriam started the first like Pakistani restaurant here like 6 months ago.
Whoa, 6 months ago.
Yeah, before that it was just there's some Indian restaurants, and even if the Indian restaurants the Indian restaurants would be like owned by Pakistanis probably, but like it's just like everybody has to like pretend to be a different ethnicity when they start a restaurant. So like if there's like if you're from Iran, you got to have you got to say like Persian, right? or you gotta like you gotta like present an ethnicity that's like palatable to like Southern people. So you might be like
something.
So you might say Mediterranean instead of like Palestinian.
Exactly. Oh yeah, they still do that, even though there's so many Muslims in Chicago.
Right.
A lot of the Arab folks go, oh, we have a Mediterranean restaurant.
Yes, right.
I guess you guys have a seafood cult. That's the thing. My wife and I, we were there. We were like, so back then I used to eat like not halal meat and stuff. So I would like try to go to like Chick-fil-A or something.
Mm-hmm.
My wife was like, we go out. She get like what shrimp? Shrimp's big there. What? But I was like,
shrimp. Just any food really. I mean, any oysters, shellfish.
Oysters. That's the thing. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And we were staying in like
Scallops,
which is like, I guess that North Charleston was kind of like the almost like a strip mall. There's an outlet out there or something, and a movie theater.
There's the like the Tanger outlet stores, but North Charleston is the reputation is that it's like that's inner city Charleston, like people say, and then there's like Mount Pleasant's white, and then like West Ashley is like a mix, and so yeah.
So what do you do when you're not working on comedy and working on bits and reviewing and cutting your bits out?
Hopefully reading the Bible.
No, I'm not allowed to read the Bible anymore because I'm Catholic. So
no,
seriously. I don't know if y'all know that if y'all don't know that stereotype, but the stereotype was that Catholics aren't allowed to read the Bible because the whole Protestant Reformation got started because like Luther read the Bible and the printing press made it so anybody could read the Bible and anybody could interpret it for themselves, and so then that became like the Protestant Reformation. So there was an old stereotype about Catholics that we weren't allowed to read it. So it's just something we say. But as far as what I do, I spend a lot of time with my family. I got 2 kids, 2 and 1, and my wife, hang out with friends, watch you guys,
You watch us.
No, yeah. But by the way, guys, we just got to. I think we should all tell them. After
I mean, like, all I do is read, and like I read pretty fast, and I just absorb like material, and like I just love doing it, and so I spend a lot of time reading, a lot of time like online, like making people mad, and then yeah. So.
Well, speaking of online making people mad, you're seeing a whole evolution or seeing the Muslim community that you've been involved with for years, having this huge inclination towards leftist identity politics. And I know you'll have.
Do you see that as having changed in the last, let's just say, 5 years?
I think it's getting worse, in terms of especially some of the attitudes towards white people and some of the venom that's coming from some of the critical race theory type social justice activists that have really adopted this mindset and are perpetuating it to a lot of immigrant youth and disaffected youth who, I've seen firsthand, just saying, white people are evil, and not even like something that they give so much thought to. It's just become entertainment for, and become something that you just kind of get points for on various.
What do y'all think has driven that?
I think it's a lot of the leftist Democratic Party type push that's coming from them, at least from the far left elements.
I think it's Trump phobia, an irrational fear of Donald Trump. Because I
think that's a big part of it. I think that there's a if you feel like one side hates you, then you're naturally more likely to ally with the other side, and that's true of Catholics, and except we went the other way. There's a lot of Catholics who because of there's something, I think like Jack Brown said it, but it was like the Democratic Party is like, we will protect you in exchange for the souls of your children. I think that's what he said. Like the Democratic Party says to Muslims. I think that's the same thing that Republicans have said to Christians, where it's like, look, there's all these laws that are like religious liberty is under threat, and like, don't worry, we will protect you, but at the same time, you have to go along with whatever the free market sort of limited government kind of stuff that like traditionally was not part of the Catholic tradition. And like, you know, there's one thing about being strategic and being like, okay, what is this, you know, is this, how can we be strategic about our faith and like the survival of our people, you know, in this time? What will cause our faith to thrive? What is for the best of the country? There's all those sort of like prudential questions. At the same time, like, there is a sense, I think, that like, you know, is this a different tradition that is sort of that is infecting people's minds? And you never know. You know, sometimes you talk with somebody and they have the same concerns as people who are like, you know, as you say, critical race theorists, and but they are operating from like the Catholic tradition, and they are just talking about race in a way that is like within the broader thing. But there's other times you talk with people and like it is clear from the way that they speak that like they are not operating like from within like what they're saying, and the way that they're speaking and the way that they behave towards people who disagree with them is not in keeping at all with like with the way that you were you know, like at least your tradition supposed to form people. So I don't know. It's a mess. And
well, yeah,
I don't.
With 30 seconds into you speaking, they just say you're speaking from privilege, Jeremy. You don't.
Sure.
You don't know what you're talking about, or even to me, or anyone who they just want to. Anyone who's challenging them in any way, they can just say you're speaking from privilege.
Or you're gaslighting me or something like
yeah,
that.
sure.
Yeah, it's a very sociological understanding of truth, where like the way that they are talking, it's not that like you and them are, you know, searching for truth together or trying to adjudicate a claim based on you know, like whatever tradition you're talking about. It's like when you speak at length with like with some of these folks, it becomes clear that they are just trying to place you in a like they're trying to see you as merely a symptom of a larger dynamic. And that is obviously, you know, dehumanizing to be treated like you're just a symptom of a larger dynamic, you know, as opposed to a person with a past and with a, you know, viewpoints. And but you know, for the most part, it is to treat, and this I think is where it becomes very damaging to whether like the, you know, I would say the Catholic tradition, and you know, maybe you would agree with like the Muslim tradition, where all truth claims, all claims about morality and reality are merely ways for groups to get power. And that dynamic, or that understanding of reality, becomes very clear when you speak to, you know, some of these folks, where like they are no longer trying to reason from within a tradition. It's just about like who has power, who is up, who is down, right? Yeah. So the idea that like I'm speaking from a place of privilege, it's like, well, maybe, but like, what does that have to do with like my claims about reality? Are my claims about reality true or false? You know, are they in keeping it, or is it just like, well, yeah, so like that kind of thing. Like,
and the way they even just take what you're saying about reality. Well, your reality is your reality. It's not any objective truth about anything, and that's what, you know, the other various philosophies. What's it called?
Yeah. Anyways,
well, what's that philosophy?
Which one? Postmodernism.
Postmodernism.
Yeah.
So postmodernism is primarily about that. Like anything that you say, well, that's just your truth. It doesn't have any other overarching truth to the world. So
I mean, I'm convinced that the majority of the Muslims in America are actually are like fundamentally their ultimate paradigm is postmodern. They don't realize it. They don't know Islam. No one learned Islam. They didn't learn basic theology or law, which I mean, you know, basics, because they assume like the problem is our generation and maybe our elders even. We went to Sunday school and learned jack squat, right?
Yeah.
You know, we went there and learned, like, I remember this one time it was like, you know, I remember the youth group, man. The youth group was the most useless thing. I think our parents just took us there because they wanted to unload us for a couple hours, right? Yeah. We didn't want to be there because we were missing NFL football. So we were already pissed off. And then the dude teaching us was like some, you know, some high school teacher, some person. You remember you talked about this story, you know, and I remember like the conversation will be like a friend of mine. I remember one time he walked in there, teacher was late. He's like, yeah, you know, he's probably making out with some chick in the car. That's why he was there yet. So what's going on? He shows up and then he's like, I got a question for you. He's like, what's that? He's like, you know, if we can go to heaven and stuff, you know, if you can get whatever you want, like, can I go try out hell to see if I like it or not? I mean, this is the kind of conversations we were having, right? Right?
So like, it's just a place that you either like it or not.
And it's like it's just like some open. You might as well. It may have well been like a random philosophy free for all. You know, because
I mean, what's interesting is that like, and I was thinking about this earlier today about, and I used to like in college, you know, I didn't know any Hindus. But I would refer to this as like the bad Hindu problem, right? Like, and so apology to any Hindus who think I'm like Orientalizing you or something like that. Like, but,
any Hindus watch us.
Yeah, but like,
you're the same.
You know, if somebody came up to me and was like, "You're a bad Hindu," like my first reaction would be, "Well, okay, I'm not a Hindu though." Like that would be my first reaction, and I think that like in this life, a lot of the criticisms that you get are from people who simply do not share your tradition and your understanding of reality, but for some reason we allow it to like get in our heads or bother us, you know. And so like a lot of the criticisms that I get, like, you know, if somebody were to make a moral claim about me that like, you know, I did this wrong or I was doing this, I would hear them out for the most part. You know, I'd listen to them and stuff, and like, if I could translate it into my tradition, or if I knew they were coming from within my own, then it would be like an interesting conversation, and we could have a shared third frame of reference to where we are both like talking about, did I do something wrong according to this objective sort of, or at least maybe not objective, but like, you know, this sort of moral code that exists outside of us. That has a claim on us. And then that becomes like a form of reasoning. It's a form of moral reasoning. Like, did I do something wrong? Let's find out. Let's go, you know, something. But for the most part, a lot of the criticism that I get, or I think it's true for anybody, most of the things when people say it's like they're calling you a bad Hindu, where you're like, okay, but I don't believe what you believe. Like, I don't, and it's not that they are like wayward, sort of like, you know, someone from within your tradition that's being like, that's, you know, is mixed up or something, but like, no, they are operating from an entirely different understanding of reality than you agree with. And when that happens, when you realize that, it's much more freeing, where you're like, okay, well, I don't, you know, like, you know, have a nice day. I hope that you're, you know, like, where, you know, you can tell me what you think, but like we're no longer, sort of like sharing this, you know, this same moral vocabulary. And so there's certain things that people say where like, you know, a light goes off, or I'm like, oh, okay, they're not speaking my language. And so,
again, it's there's a justification about like, well, maybe we have a different path of getting there. But I was on a Muslim website, some Muslim political action committee website, and it's all Muslims. It's not like inter-religious or nothing. It's all Muslims there, and they got pronouns on there.
Yeah.
And I'm like looking through it, they're mostly like she, her, he, him. And then it's like they, them. And I Google like, what is a they, them pronoun? Because the sister that got elected in Oklahoma, she's like a she, they or something. I'm like, what the hell does that even mean? So I'm Googling it, and they're trying to use it, and when you put it in a sentence, it doesn't make grammatical sense. It screws everything up. I'm like, sure. This is like, man, my English teacher would have failed me if I used this, if I threw this, try to make a sense out of this, right? But like,
that's actually a pretty good stand-up bit right there. But anyway,
but I think that's just like, but it's crept in. So I'll share this, and I've actually reached out to the brother personally. I'm not gonna mention his name, but there's a Muslim comedian, right, who's well known for having like pretty terrible takes on social media. But he's someone I've known. We kind of grew up together, right? So I reached out to him after he was like propping up this sister who won in Oklahoma. And I was just like, you know, I reached out to him. I was like, yo, bro, like I remember we used to be in the same circles. You learned from Shayuk, from scholars back in the day, right? Like I can't see how they would be okay with, and on top of that, I have no problem with her being elected based on her credentials as a politician, right? But then to highlight her trans or non-binariness as like the thing, and we need to celebrate that. I'm like, what the, like, that's the part I have a problem with, because like at the end of the day, your constituents in Oklahoma, they probably got stuff that needs to be dealt with, and it's not because, and you're not going to get it done because you're trans or non-binary. Like this representation nonsense to me just like doesn't. I mean, you know, we just got sucked in. He didn't reply to my message, so I would have to assume that he just doesn't like
cancel you. He canceled you.
I mean, or he just. Because he
made a post, mention his name.
He made a post today about Simon Hodge.
We made fun of him.
I was just going to talk about that, but
you know what I'm saying? And I'm reading this thing, and I'm like, and he's mentioned, God and him, they used to be friends and stuff, and I'm like, yo, did you even like we just took it as face value, and this is whole thing like, oh, there's women who complained about. So apparently,
so just to give some backdrop, Hassan Minhaj's crew in the show that he had on Netflix.
Right.
A bunch of women who went public and
I know about that.
Blog post about that his show was toxic or the environment was abusive. They didn't go into any detail, didn't provide a single sentence on what exactly was abusive about his show, but it was abusive.
That's okay, because your imagination will fill in the rest, right?
Right.
Yeah, so the worst possible thing.
Yeah, because when you say abuse, you're like, bro, that sounds pretty bad.
That's pretty much what happened. Like I remember my I have a non-Muslim friend who like used to attend.
That's good for you, man. I appreciate it.
You know, but Talib Chicago had a, you know, their founder's brother named Osama Cannon. And Osama has ALS, but there was some kind of similar accusation that came up with him. And it was an email sent out, right? It was an email sent out. And my dude hits me up. He's like, hey, whatever happened to that dude who was like banging all the chicks in his congregation? And I'm like, what? That's not what happened.
Right.
Like, because they leave it in this, they spin it in this way that makes you assume like the worst possible thing.
Right.
Yeah. And that's basically what happened in our most recent show that we had. Was seeming a bit controversial. I don't know if you heard about it, Jeremy, but
I heard about it.
Yeah. It's Jeremy. It's not Jeremy.
Yeah, I heard about it.
Oh yeah, you did.
Sorry about that, Jeffrey.
Look,
he also has a very high. That individual also has a very large Pakistani audience.
Yes. So there must be some overlap somewhere. But yeah, we lost some patrons.
Yeah,
sorry to see you go.
Oh, for real,
folks? Yeah, I mean, look, this show will never ever change around how much money we're getting. This is a place where, you know, we found a medium. We didn't want to be with the crazies on the far conservative part of the aisle, and we have. Well, you see, our spectrum is so weird, Jeremy. I'm sure you know, it's not like a linear spectrum. Our spectrum is like star shaped,
for sure.
So we try to find the most middle path that we can find, and away from all the nonsense. And sometimes people don't like it because they want us to be part of their group. They heard a few key words from us where we didn't want to be associated with another group that they didn't like, and they thought that we were with them all of a sudden. Sometimes the activist crowd kind of thinks about that because we're pretty vocal against various tyrants in our Muslim world, and sometimes they think that, oh well, hook, line, and sinker, Mad Mamluks is an activist organization, but we see a whole nutty part of activism that we do not want to associate with, and we're like, hey, we're not part of that either.
And I mean, if you think about it, like it's almost like if you think of that just like from an economic standpoint, like it is a more efficient use of their time to try and get you to say to say something, or get you to shun somebody, or to do that, rather than they go around saying it. Like, because if they can get you to say it, if they can send, and I realized that because people would send me messages, about like some horrible thing that happened in the Muslim world, or like maybe their like uncle had like cancer, and then like I wouldn't respond to it because I would get like so many of them, and then I would get like a response that is like, I guess you don't care, whatever, and it would make me feel bad like that. And then but then I was like, you know what, that's almost like it's a very efficient use of their time, because they could like try and start their own organization and try and start their own page and like try and get a bunch of views and then eventually try and address these issues, or they can just make me feel like awful. And it's pretty, I mean, it's smart, and like I don't necessarily I mean, I'm not going to fault them for going about them sufficient way. But if you're on our end of it, like what you get is just like, you know, people who like, yeah, it's they're trying to use you as and so you're no longer a person. That's one thing that I've thought a lot about with like fame is like when you start getting famous, like you become a brand. And then once you become a brand, like you are, it's almost like a weird like Messiah complex where like, but not Messiah in the sense of you saving people, but like you becoming this like product to be consumed by like people. Yeah. And then they get mad when they don't like how they're consuming you. And so and it's in a way, and this is like, you know, this will just invite charges of privilege because it certainly doesn't sound like a big problem, but like, you know, there is something dehumanizing about fame, and where you get successful and then people, you are just a projection, or you are a tool for them to, achieve their goals, or you are just another, you know, like I mentioned earlier, you are an example of a larger dynamic. And so then you're no longer a person. And there's something, you know, and I've had to learn how to not be sensitive to that. But at the same time, like, I think that's an important conversation we need to have about celebrities, about people who are, who do get to be like prominent or, you know, listened to, where you're like, you know, I feel like the pressure and the desire to like hold on to some kind of independence, right? Even though I know that like part of why I'm successful or whatever isn't because I was just being me, but because I gave people something that they wanted, like something that they like psychologically needed. And so if they continue needing that and continue wanting that, it's not like their fault. So I don't know. I go back and forth, but it's certainly something that we need to discuss.
The way I think about it is like, as Muslims, I always feel like we owe every other Muslim some basic right of brotherhood and sisterhood, right? It's incumbent upon us, right? The problem with social media has allowed us to, and sometimes, so even remember last year we had the whole issue where there was that clip of me like talking about colonialism with satire.
Oh yeah,
and that went viral. And so my thing was
they took something out of context.
So for some reason they come after, like I'm the one that plays devil's advocate. Well, sometimes it's actually I agree with the opposing view, right? Mm-hmm. And it's funny is that they'll take my clip because I'll be playing devil's advocate with one of my co-hosts or sure, you know, showing the other opinion, and I might use satire, and so they'll take a clip. And so you're taking like a minute, 15, 30 second, 45-second clip of a 2-hour podcast that we're not just not even being serious, putting it out there saying this is what a Mad Mamluks host says, and like, you got people who are supposed to be PhDs or professors who were like jumping all over that. I'm like, listen, I'm like what kind of intellectual honesty is going on there? I try to reason with them stuff. So some people I'll DM them and I will talk, but some people you realize aren't interested in that. They're like, no, you're serious. Like that last case with the dude in Bangladesh, man. I was like, yo, he was, and like, you know, and I would think about like, maybe I give benefit of the doubt, but like it happened like too many times.
And all of them are part of a clique. And so surprising because you're seeing different areas of the spectrum who are all activist minded. They're like, oh, well, one person, signed off on it. You know, I'm just going to like it too. Like, wait a second. You just completely didn't even investigate anything. You just took something, a small clip, a 15-second clip. And then they later on, because we don't let it go, man. When you call us out like that, we'll blast you back and we'll show people the full clip. And then they'll finally take down their Facebook post because we don't go after people like in that way, the way they do, but we will certainly defend ourselves and make sure that people understand that, hey, what they're representing about us is completely dishonest and disingenuous, and they're trying to just score points with a certain crowd. So
there's I mean, like you are a useful thing to them, where it's kind of like you sit around, you like joke about Britney Spears or something, or you are talking about some dynamic, and then you just reference a celebrity, like that, like you're using them as just an example of what you're talking about, right? And you know, part of fame or notoriety or whatever is that you become one of those people. Like you become, like, if somebody is let's say like a Pakistani comedian is frustrated because they're, you know, putting out a lot of content on social media, and they like don't think that I put as much effort as they do, but I get, you know, famous because I'm white. Like, you know, like, you know, for them, they see that, you know, and for them, that's all I am. Right. And I mean, you know, it's one thing, like I could come back and be like, no, this is, you know, look at my history and look at how much, you know, thought and effort I put into this and blah, blah, blah. But like, at the same time, it's like, you know, like they have their own story and their own mindset. And like, you know, I am, as long as they don't like, you know, call employers or something and try and like get me canceled. Like I think like that's where I draw the line, where like, you know, when I guess in law it's called tortious interference, where you go after someone's contracts that they have. Like that to me is like that's the line of cancel culture. But like on the safe side of the line is, you know, just like, I don't necessarily have to be like, people can talk about me and they can have theories about me and they can, you know, use me as an example in whatever kind of in their struggle to understand the world and understand their place in it. And I don't necessarily have to be a part of that like discussion, right? Like I remember I was talking to my therapist and it was like, you know, if they're like, let's say just hypothetically, there was some like conference on like Jeremy McLellan's comedy, right? And people got to present papers. Like I don't have to go to that. Like, I don't have to go to, like, it's my job to put stuff out there and to, you know, if somebody wants my opinion on something, I'll tell them. But like, at the same time, like one of the reasons why I put stuff out there is to have it grappled with, to have people interact with it. And I don't necessarily get a veto or I don't necessarily get the final word in how people understand me. So like, if I am, and you know, in addition to being me, to being like a human being with like thoughts and feelings and a story and like all that stuff, in addition to that, if I am an example of a larger process, then like, that's fine. Like, you know, so I go back and forth with this, where I'm like, all right, I understand it. And I see that as just the, you know, like you present papers in school on like different, you know, figures. It'd be weird if one of them showed up and was like, what'd you say about me? Like, so, you know, at a certain point you're like, all right, like maybe people get to understand me in a way that I don't understand myself. I don't know.
I think for me, it's basically like, again, we have a Muslim audience. I think we expect a baseline respect, even if we disagree. Like, even if someone on the left, people like we would disagree with, then as long as they believe in the Shahada, in the testimony of faith, and you know, I think that I owe them some respect. Mm-hmm. And I feel like that, and this is one thing I was talking to many people, my friends on the liberal side, is like, I feel like conservatives, people more conservative-minded Muslims understand that, right? Yeah. You know, and some of them don't. Some of them are also going to be jerks, and they don't treat But I think that's due, and because of that expectation that I think is fair for us to have, it's disappointing when people are not disagreeing, but like you being disingenuous and being slanderous.
And I think the reason for that is their morality is being inherited by social media, by this activist culture that's being kind of cultivated in social media. And so they take their cues from that, and that kind of inherently becomes their religion, even though their Islamic identity or whatever, that's kind of like their way of saying, hey, you know what, I identify with one of these intersections with that within society, and I kind of belong to this oppressed sector or this, and this is something that our show has kind of been battling with and trying to explain to people that, hey, look, your likelihood to get diabetes is more dangerous than Islamophobia. You know, your diet is horrible. You should be worried about that right now. You know, so I think that's where our challenge is, and why we are more of a cult following than anything. We're not celebrities. We get, you know, on a good video we might get 10,000 views or whatever. You know, so and we're happy with that. Because we've made it so that we have redundancy in the way we have jobs and stuff like that.
I think there's something like, and it's something that I've noticed is that like when I speak to someone who's who's Muslim and is like pretty like embedded in like the long tradition of Islam and Islamic reasoning, and I like there's a and the same thing is true of like the trad Catholics, like the actual trad Catholics, not the ones with like frog avatars on Twitter who like converted yesterday and want to go on a crusade. Like, you know, like when I talk to people, that there's a sense of like, you know, if you're part of a tradition that's over 1,000 years old, right? There's a kind of like stability that you have, and a kind of like it's humility, but it's also like, you know, this is something that I believe is true, and that I also believe is true whether I believe it or not. Like I think this is a reality that exists apart from me, and like when that happens, when I get a sense of that, like there's a kind of freedom and just a it's not indifference, but it's sort of like, okay, I believe that Catholicism is true, and I believe it's true whether I believe it or not. Like, and so it's something that exists. Like even if I were to like stop being Catholic, I think the church would still exist, right? It's still this long tradition. And so, but for people whose understanding of reality is 10 minutes old, like, and let's face it, like most of the worldview that people have would have been completely alien 10 years ago or 20 years ago, right? And that's why they can't watch TV shows that are, you know, more than 10 years old, is because they're like they see them as just hateful, right? Like for them, there is this sense of urgency. There is this sense of like they are the ones who like their tradition might die with them, right? Because their kids are going to think that they were problematic, right? And so like liberalism just can't pass itself down in the same way. And so I have that's a big difference between when I relate to somebody who I know doesn't like the tradition they're a part of. Their view of reality is like, okay, this is true whether whether I'm hearing it or not. This is something that exists external to me. Whereas people who are sort of part of the woke like movement or have that kind of understanding, it's like it's all them, and it's all people who who haven't been canceled as of like 5 minutes ago.
Sure. You know, the thing of it is like, I think a lot of their grievances are legitimate, right?
Sure.
Like, I think if you look at like critical race theory, for instance, there might be some valid points, but the packaging is so egregiously bad, meaning that like, the way you come across it is some jerk PhD on Twitter. And that's going to, you know, like, why do people even like, when you think about religion, why do people like accept religion? Or like, when you talk about people who convert to Islam, for instance, it was like somebody who they met who displayed what the ethics of Islam was about, right? Mm-hmm. But when you see someone who's like a hardcore like leftist, and they might have legitimate grievances, but they come off as a freaking jerk, and it's irrational. You can't have a conversation with them, and you know you're like, oh, you're gaslighting me now. I'm like, what the hell does that even mean? You're automatically like, human nature is going to shut down. Most folks are not going to go for that, right? Yeah. So I think they're doing a disservice to actual oppression, because they're just being jerks about it and creating these like personality cults and these like cliques that aren't really getting. I mean, is that really getting us anywhere? No.
Well, it's just that they've built an industry around it, and they're making money off of it. They're selling books, they're doing interviews, and they've become, you know, large scale personalities that are being invited to talks with the honorary.
It's very unstable though, and I don't envy them. I mean, there has to be a very deep fear within them that like, because they know that that they could be turned on at any moment, and that they could slip up and do something wrong and just be done. And so I think there is among those people a very deep anxiety, and it's an anxiety I think that's inherent within liberalism, to know that like your kids are going to think that you're an awful person, because you are, training them to reject what you believe. And so like it's not a good place to live. I think for the most part, like, if like I know enough about Islam where if I had a problem with one of you guys and I wanted to like confront you about it, I would be able to put it in like Islamic in like sort of understanding language, right? And so like for people who are academic critical race theorists, I think there's a big difference like between those who can like sort of enter into your language and like just speak normal, right? Like so many times I'm talking to like these folks and I'm like, just talk like a normal person. Like, and if you can't do that, then like you're just a classist, like, jerk, because like the vast majority of people in America can't understand what you're saying. And if you can't put it in, so like, somebody who is like a critical race theorist, I would hope would be able to explain like to me why racism is wrong in like either in regular language or in like why as a Catholic should I believe that racism is wrong. What is the parts of my own tradition that have consistently stood against racism? Like why is racism wrong according to Catholicism? There's like someone who's like an educated person should be able to answer that. For the most part, it doesn't seem like that. It's like they're operating within their own sort of self-referential like loop of where people use the same language with them and they use it with them. And then when they encounter you and you're like, okay, speak to me, in this way, that it doesn't. And so like, but like the canceling and the like, the mobs and the like the speed at which all this happens is the main thing that I keep coming back to, where like it's normal for, if I get famous because people like me, it's normal if I do stuff that people don't like for me to not be famous anymore, right? That's a normal like sort of, that's a normal kind of ebb and flow of fame that I'm comfortable with. But the speed at which a lot of it happens is like alarming, where stuff happens before you can even react to it. And people who were fans of yours write you off, which again, people don't have to be fans, but like there's a quickness to it, and it's very important to them for that quickness to be powerful and to be effective, because people will forget about it within a week, and so they have to do all the real damage within 1 week of the original offense. They have to get you, because if they take too long, then people will forget about it. So
well, that's what happened with us with Knack. It feels like Muslim Twitter works that way. Like 2 weeks ago, it was Knack. Then Muhammad Hijab comes in and is like, "Oh, what up, you guys? I got a trans hot behind it." Right. You know what I'm saying?
So a lot of people have started putting in their contracts like cooling off periods. I know, like in Silicon Valley, a lot of people who sign on to stuff, they're like, "All right, if anything happens online, 2 weeks, like no decision about my employment can be made like within 2 weeks, and then we'll revisit it." And those just, whenever that happens, like it just goes away.
The thing of it is, though, it's like, but you mentioned the doxing, the like losing your job over stuff, because as you mentioned, we're not getting paid off this sucker, right? We all got like day jobs in completely different fields, right? I mean, you're in IT. I make COVID tests. I don't know what this dude does.
I just chill.
He's supposed to be a teacher.
He's supposed to be a teacher, yeah. So, but like the thing of it is, I on my own channel, Sultan and Sneakers channel, I did a show with these guys who they lost their restaurant in 3 days. Yeah, because of their position on Black Lives Matter. Granted, they said some pretty dumb stuff. Sure, but it got to the point where the dude's wife got fired from her real estate company. He wasn't there. It was like, oh, but guilt by association. Oh, you're married to this dude who's a racist bigot, so therefore you all must be a racist bigot. So therefore, you're gonna take your license away.
It's a bad representation for the company.
You know what I'm saying? It happened like real, but there was some cooling off period. I mean, the dude, like the dude who I interviewed, he was out preaching outside his brother's restaurant on Friday, and he said some like pretty insane stuff. Don't get me wrong, I'm not defending it, but he took his day off on Friday. Monday morning, he walks in, boss is like, "Gots to go." Yep.
If I can just shift it really quick, just
sure.
something
we got like a few minutes left.
Yeah. So, like, we talked about a lot of things, and one of the things that we know, being in the public eye, for a majority of people, brings a lot of anxiety, right? Because you have to, I mean, ranging all the way from reading comments. A lot of people say, don't read the comments. It's going to mitigate a lot of your anxiety. There's a lot of things that people do, and especially entertainers like yourself, there's a lot of things that you have to do to mitigate a lot of this anxiety, right? So there's a lot of people that talk about, as far as stand-up comedians and entertainers, that there's this growing level of depression amongst like stand-up comedians and entertainers. Is that something you see, and like, why do you think that is?
Yeah, I mean, I don't even know if it's growing. I think it's just always been true. Comedians have a lower life expectancy than the rest of the population, and a lot of it is, there's two reasons for it. Number one is like a lot of people go into comedy because of mental health reasons, because comedy is a really helpful way to process reality and to process trauma or different issues you have, and certainly a big reason why I went into it, learning how to reach other people and to connect with other people through comedy is something that's really been wonderful for me. And so you bring with that all of your, health baggage or issues like that. And at the same time, the lifestyle of comedy is so awful. There's like late nights, obviously there's constant travel, which, wears on you. There's the anxiety of being famous and having people, try and take you down, or there's but also for the first few years of doing comedy, a lot of times you're getting paid in alcohol, where you go and you do a mic and they're like, well, we can't pay you, but we can give you drink tickets. So drink tickets are a big thing in New York, where you come and you do some comedy, you get some drink tickets. And so you're out there and they're paying you in poison. Right. And
is that what you are? Is that why you're? Is that why?
No, I sold my drink tickets.
Oh, okay. Anyways, yeah, go ahead.
Well, so the lifestyle of it is rough too. And as you get more and more famous, you're traveling and it's there's temptations everywhere. And
but when is that moment where something was completely worth it? What is the buildup that you're like, okay, this was worth it, or this was so rewarding? Is it like when you get a really good laugh of something you were working on, and that just
I think that there's stuff definitely stuff on stage where something works the way you want it to, where you're able to connect with other people, and especially if you have a history of mental health issues where you feel like you can't connect with other people, then I think being able to connect with somebody and having people come up to you afterwards, and there's something that's just so beautiful about that, and just a sigh of relief when when someone if you're a teacher, a student comes up to you and says, so I think what you're saying was, and they say it and it's perfect, right? And it's just exactly what you were going for. Oh, yeah. And it's just it's just so beautiful.
You're right.
That feeling of being able to connect is so great. And then at the same time, there's comments you get that are really nice. There's, but for me, it's the connection. It's it's feeling like I've successfully connected to another human being, and that the stuff that goes on in my head is not totally foreign to the world, right? And I am able to reach across the barrier and connect with other people. That to me is great, and that's why I do it.
Beautiful.
Jeremy, thank you so much for joining us today. Miss out and
Jewel. All right, it's very last minute.
Yeah.
We got Joel.
Hello.
Wow.
Hi, you want those nice people?
Mashallah. All the dating so happy that are watching.
That's right.
Made them so happy.
Yep.
You got any things coming out? Books?
I mean, yeah, just follow me on social media. I'm putting stuff out. So, yeah. It's just my name. So, yep.
A pleasure to have you on, man.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks a lot. I appreciate it.
It was awesome, dude.
Thank you, guys. Help us out on patreon.com/the Mamluks. We lost some listeners. Help us show them that you guys will be behind us through thick and thin. I doubt they will be, but it's good to hope for the best. That's what our faith teaches. We just hope, right, Sheikh?
Yes.
Am I onto something?
Yeah.
All right. for my co-host, Sheikh Hammer, Maheen, and myself. So we'll see you later. Assalamu alaikum.